Most men believe that expressing interest through constant communication is how you win a woman's heart. They assume that by texting more, explaining more, showing emotional vulnerability, they're building connection. But what they're really doing without realizing it is slowly destroying the tension needed for emotional desire. You see, a woman doesn't crave what she fully understands. She doesn't obsess over what's predictable. When a man reveals everything too quickly, when he's always available, always expressive, always explaining himself, he strips away the emotional tension that creates attraction. He thinks he's being romantic, but she experiences it as pressure. It's not that she dislikes communications, she just doesn't want it all at once, on your terms. You're playing by your emotional rules, not hers. Men chase clarity, women chase mystery. That's the polarity most men miss. She doesn't fall for the content of what you say, she falls for the way it makes her feel. And constant availability makes her feel emotionally full, which is the opposite of desire. Desire needs emotional hunger. It needs space to grow. That's why you'll often see a woman pulling back from the guy who texts her good morning every day, without fail. He thinks he's being thoughtful, but to her, it feels like he's trying too hard. And the moment she feels like she has you completely, her emotional curiosity shuts down. She knows the outcome, and women don't obsess over conclusions, they obsess over questions. If your presence feels predictable, if your communication is overly consistent, you become emotionally flat. That's why women are more drawn to men who leave space, who aren't constantly explaining their every move. They want to feel something, not be told what to feel. And that emotion is born in the gap between what she knows and what she wonders. Scarcity is the unspoken language of emotional value. Most men don't realize how powerful restraint is in attraction. They flood a woman with attention, thinking that constant communication shows care and consistency. But to her, it becomes noise, predictable, excessive, and emotionally dull. A woman doesn't want to feel like you're trying to win her with volume. She wants to feel pulled in by mystery, by the feeling that your attention has weight. When every message is instantly returned, when every question is answered in full, you remove all emotional uncertainty, and without uncertainty, there's no spark. Scarcity isn't about being cold or distant for no reason. It's about valuing your presence and energy enough to give it selectively. When a woman senses that you're not desperate to fill every silence, that you're not trying to force emotional closeness, she starts to lean in on her own. That lean in is where emotional investment begins. She starts wondering, starts reaching out more, starts thinking about you in the quiet moments. Because you're not flooding her with data, you're creating a rhythm of emotional suspense, and that rhythm is addictive. When your words feel earned, when your replies aren't expected but appreciated, you build an emotional pull that most men can't access. The man who communicates with scarcity isn't being manipulative, he's being intentional. He understands that presence is power and that too much access dissolves tension. Women are emotional thinkers. They don't respond to logic the way men do. They respond to feelings, to imagination, to the subtle cues that something is just out of reach. And when you learn to leave just enough space between your presence and your absence, she fills that space with emotion. Not because you told her to, but because she can't help it. The men who truly captivate women aren't the ones constantly proving themselves. They're the ones who know how to maintain emotional distance while still offering presence. It's not about neglect, it's about restraint. Women don't become emotionally addicted to the man who gives them everything up front. They become obsessed with the man who gives just enough to keep them wondering. That emotional distance isn't cruelty, it's composure. It's a form of self-control that allows a woman to experience emotional suspense. And suspense is what fuels desire. The man who responds slowly, who doesn't rush to explain, who lets moments breathe, that man isn't seen as careless. He's seen as powerful because women don't want to be constantly reassured. They want to feel a man's inner stability. His calm, his ability to not chase validation. That stability makes her feel like she has to earn his energy. And the second she feels like she's working for it, she begins to invest. That investment is everything. It's what transforms interest into emotional attachment. When a man speaks rarely but meaningfully, he forces her to listen deeper, to read between the lines, to feel the emotion behind his silence. Most guys panic when they sense a shift in her energy. They double down, try harder, explain more. But the high-value man does the opposite. He remains still, unbothered, because he knows his worth isn't tied to constant communication. He doesn't need to be understood right now. He plays the long game. And in that stillness, he becomes emotionally larger in her mind. She thinks about him more when he's not around. She imagines, fantasizes, wonders. That's how emotional obsession is built, not through availability, but through selective presence, through being just distant enough to pull her deeper in. What most men don't understand is that energy speaks louder than words. It's not just what you say, it's how you say it, when you say it, and the intent behind it. A woman feels your emotional energy in the pacing of your replies, the tone of your messages, the way you carry silence. Fast, eager responses scream insecurity, even if your words are confident. Long drawn-out paragraphs come off as emotional dumping. Even if your intentions are good, she isn't just reading your texts, she's sensing your frame. That's why the man who responds with calm, delayed confidence creates more emotional impact than the one who replies within seconds. He's not ignoring her, he's not playing a game, he's signaling that he's grounded in his own world. He's not moved by urgency. That creates the feeling of safety through strength, not through overavailability. The guy who gives just enough, who says more with less, builds curiosity. He's not rushed. His words are intentional. He communicates like a man who knows. His attention is valuable, and that energy pulls her in. You don't need to flood her inbox. You just need to send one line with presence, a sentence that makes her think, a pause that makes her feel. That contrast between communication and silence, between presence and space, is what creates tension. And tension is the root of emotional desire. Women don't get hooked by information, they get hooked by sensation. When you learn to manage your emotional energy, when your communication feels rare and powerful instead of scattered and constant, she starts to hang on to your words. She rereads them. She looks for meaning, not because you're trying to be deep, but because you're no longer easy to access. That emotional shift changes everything. Women don't become obsessed with what they fully possess. They become obsessed with what they can't quite grasp. When a man makes himself too available, too open, too emotionally predictable, he removes all mystery from the equation. And without mystery, there's no emotional suspense. Obsession requires suspense. It thrives in the unknown. In the emotional gaps her mind tries to fill. When you give her access to your every thought and feeling, there's no room for her to wonder, no room to imagine. But when you communicate with discipline, when you speak in riddles instead of monologues, when your presence feels earned rather than expected, she begins to feel something deeper. She starts thinking about you when you're not around. She begins to question, to overthink, to seek more. And every question she asks herself builds emotional investment. That's the secret. You're not forcing her to feel she's doing it to herself. Her imagination becomes your ally. And the man who understands this stops trying to be understood all the time. He lets her chase clarity. He lets her crave resolution. Most men talk to avoid being misunderstood, but the high-value man, he's okay with being a little unclear, because he knows that ambiguity draws her in. It activates her curiosity, her desire to decode, her emotional hunger. The more she chases that emotional resolution, the more she ties herself to him without even realizing it. That's not manipulation, it's masculine control. It's leadership through silence. It's emotional power through presence. The man who can hold back without going cold, who can delay without disrespect, who can engage without overexposing, he becomes unforgettable. Because what he offers isn't constant validation, it's rare access. And in a world of noise, rare access becomes emotional gold.